When I say we were ordinary, I mean it in the best way possible. Ashley and Ethan were the couple everyone assumed had it all two careers that paid the bills, a Sunday ritual of pancakes, the same vintage mug he bought her on their third anniversary. We laughed in the right places, celebrated the right milestones, and wore the same comfortable silence at dinner that felt like an unspoken promise. But ordinary is a complicated disguise. Behind our routine lived a hunger that neither of us named. Ethan worked late. I told myself it was the promotion, the pressure, the deadlines. He told me I worried too much, that love didn't need to be urgent every single day. We both wanted to believe that was true. Then Liam walked into my life, not all at once, but as a whisper of change. He was Ethan's new client, a designer with a smile that lingered a fraction too long, and a laugh that leaned close. At first, my attention to him was purely professional, names exchanged, polite conversation. But human chemistry is a small, relentless animal. The more I saw Liam, the more the air around him felt charged, like static before a storm. He noticed me noticing him the way a musician notices a familiar chord. There was a flirtation in the way he complimented my ideas at a meeting, and a softness in the way he remembered the tiny details I thought I let go of. It made my chest tighten in a way that was exhilarating and terrifying. Romantic tension doesn't arrive as a dramatic trumpet. It arrives like heat through a closed window. I started to stay a little later at work, inventing reasons, a file to finish, an email that wouldn't wait until those reasons became real. Liam's messages followed, short, casual, edged with inside jokes that felt like a secret handshake. I told myself I was starving for connection, that this was merely a mirror reflecting how distant Ethan had become. Secrets began as small concessions. I'd tell myself I was only seeking attention and not betraying a person, but attention is a slippery thing. It found its way to my bones and set up camp. The night of the company holiday party, the room hummed with clinking glasses and soft music, but my attention was a tightrope. Ethan and I danced awkward, polite, and I could sense Liam across the room watching us. He approached under the pretense of congratulating Ethan on a successful quarter. His hand briefly touched my arm. That touch had electric punctuation. Later, the three of us ended up on the same sidewalk, the winter air compressing the space around us. Liam bent to tie his shoe, then looked up and said something that made my heart drop like a stone, something small and intimate that he hadn't meant for me to hear aloud. Ethan didn't notice, I did. A pattern formed, stolen conversations that felt like confession, lingering glances that read like bookmarks between chapters. The betrayal didn't announce itself with fireworks. It came through texts that grew private, lunches that grew longer, and excuses that grew thinner. I told myself I would stop. I told myself 1,000 times. Then one afternoon, as I emptied Ethan's jacket to check the dry cleaning tag, a receipt fell out, coffee shop 2 a.m. A name scribbled on the back, Liam. It was proof that jumped at me in black and white, and the colors of my life blurred. Confrontation is never cinematic in real life. It's a quiet collapse. Ethan came home the night I found the receipt. I sat at the kitchen table and watched him, the man who had once been my fortress, unbutton his shirt as if preparing for bed. I placed the paper between us. For a moment, he looked at it like anyone would look at paper impersonal. Then his face closed, then opened in a way I didn't recognize. He told me the truth in fragments, a late-night thing, an affair that had started as a mistake and convinced itself it was a necessity. The words were clinical, but they burned. Liam wasn't a villain in a movie heist. He was a coworker who wanted what I had stopped offering, and Ethan was a man who let that wanting become action. We talked until we ran out of words. We argued until our voices were hoarse, and then whispered until the only sound left in the room was the hum of the refrigerator. Ethan cried once, not theatrically, just a single, honest sound, and I realized then that betrayal cuts both ways. It cuts where love has dulled, where silence has calcified around needs none of us learned to voice. We could choose to collapse completely or to examine the ruins and decide if they were worth rebuilding. We chose the harder path, not because reconciliation promised easy redemption, but because our history was a living thing that deserved, at least, a chance. We went to therapy. We learned language again, how to name loneliness, how to ask for small things like a text at noon or a walk after dinner. We put boundaries in place that felt unnatural at first. No late-night client meetings without notice. Transparency about phones and schedules. Appointments that were shared instead of hidden. We also learned to be honest with ourselves. Ethan took accountability without excuses. I admitted my curiosity and where it came from. There were nights when anger sat between us like a dense fog, and nights when remembering the good felt like a rescue. Liam drifted away, no dramatic scenes, no confrontations. He stopped returning calls when the lines became clearer. In a way, his exit taught me something essential. Affairs are rarely about the person outside the marriage, so much as the malfunction inside it. They are symptom, not solution. I won't pretend the road back was smooth. Trust is rebuilt in tiny increments. A text replied to, a date kept, a promise remembered. There were setbacks, evenings when a scent in the air would pull me backward into old images, but each time we chose to move forward instead of letting those images define us. Today we're different, not polished, not perfect, but awake. Our routines have new stitches, deliberate moments we choose for each other. Ethan makes coffee now without being asked. I leave notes in his laptop reminding him of silly things he loves. Romance returned not as fireworks, but as a steady, deliberate tending. A handheld in the dark, a shared playlist for late drives. A phone call at 3 in the afternoon because someone remembered a small triumph. Pain taught us the vocabulary of repair, humility, patience, curiosity. If there is a lesson, it is not a neat moral. People will forgive, or they won't. Some relationships heal. Some end. But if you find yourself in the dark, remember this: infidelity is not the end of the story unless you choose to let it be. It can be the beginning of an honest conversation or the final page. For Ashley and Ethan, names that, by now, are just placeholders for a truth, I learned that love can be complicated, messy, and still worth the work. But it requires courage to face the parts that are broken, not to hide them. If you stay for anything after this story, let it be the promise that silence rarely saves a relationship, and saying the hard thing often opens the only path back.